tonight is a very special night. This is really about women giving voice for the earth. But also, I'm so pleased to see men in the audience here. This is absolutely fantastic. Because, of course, it's not exclusively the women's domain. And, of course, within each and every one of us, we have both the masculine and the feminine. And it's about the balance and the interplay between that. So I'm doubly delighted to see so many men here this evening. We have some wonderful speakers today, and you'll hear from all the speakers tonight who also are giving voice in their very individual way. But it's more than that. This is very much about how then we can empower each other to become and give voice. Because as each and every single one of us stands up, it's like a lighthouse. We shine our light, and when we do that, then we actually seed our light out to others, which empowers others to do likewise themselves the same. And it's kind of like a virtual supergrid, and we start igniting each other, and it spreads faster than light itself. That's
what came to my mind when I was thinking about speaking tonight was actually a quote from a man and his teachings around the sacred feminine. His name is Llewellyn Van Lee. And before I go into a little bit more detail about our work, I wanted to just read this quote from Llewellyn. And you can go to the next slide. So, as we awaken from the repressions of the patriarchy, we need to reclaim the sacred feminine, both for our individual spiritualities and for the well-being of the planet. Our ecological devastation points to a culture that has forgotten the sacredness of the earth and the Divine Mother, as well as denied the feminine, deep understanding of the wholeness and interconnectedness of life. And our individual life, so often caught up in addictions and starved of real meaning, has a hunger to reconnect with the soul, which has always had a feminine quality. And linking our own journey and that of the world is an ancient feminine figure of the world soul, anima mundi, the spiritual presence within creation. So, Llewellyn speaks very deeply about this process. He's speaking about a spirituality, he's talking about the feminine and the soul, Mother Earth. And that's always been an important component of how we work. We don't talk about that in that language within the Green Belt movement, but really that's what our work is about. The Green Belt movement was started by Wangari Maathai, and really she started by working with the rural women in Kenya. And these are people who are very much seen as sort of the underclass of society, often illiterate women, people who have no part of decision-making and power-making processes. And they're really just there left in the rural environs to eke their living. And you wonder, why did someone like Wangari, who is so gifted and so educated, she'd gone off to the States when she was a young woman, she's the first African woman in East Africa to get a PhD, she's the first East African woman to become a professor, and really she was living quite an elite lifestyle in Nairobi, running a department at the university. But she would go into the field and she'd go and see the lives of these women. And she wasn't actually very far removed from them. Her mother was one of these women. And when she went into rural Kenya, she saw as an environmentalist the incredible degradation of the earth, the incredible loss of topsoil. She used to say it's like the earth is naked. Mother Earth is losing her dress. She's being exposed. And you can see how that was wearing and tearing at Mother Earth. And so she would go and really see the impact of this unsustainable practice that she hadn't seen as a child. And at a certain point, it was actually part of one of the UN conferences, she was asked to speak to rural women about what are their needs. And she sat down with the rural women and she thought, right, it's the early 70s, it's really about feminism. She was thinking about equal pay, equal rights. And what these women had to say was, no, actually, what we need is access to basic resources. We don't have access to clean water. We don't have access to fuel. And even today, rural Kenyan women live on firewood. That is the fuel that keeps their households going. So they were really talking about basic primary needs that were missing. And Wangari, what she did something really radical, not dissimilar to Polly. She left the university and she started working with women. And the way she started was through tree planting. And that's what our organization has been about since 1977. That's when we started. It's 35 years old now. And it's really about tree planting for rural communities. And tree planting is seen as the entry point. So it's really about an action that's doable, that's simple, that anyone can do. And this might sound like a really easy thing. Well, let me tell you, in 1977 it was pretty radical. People thought that only people with a degree, like foresters, should be able to plant trees. So Wangari said, well, actually, no, I think that we can plant trees, and I think it's a doable thing. And that's what they started to do. And it was about bringing a dress back to the earth. Bringing back the green dress of the earth. And that's where our name comes from, the Green Belt Movement. I think that what's very interesting about the process of the Green Belt Movement, because it is an empowerment process. It's a movement. There's over 4,000 community groups now, which are spread out across Kenya, mostly in the highlands, where most reforestation needs to happen. And these are women-led groups, and they are voluntary. They form themselves, they work by themselves, and they really get a small support from Green Belt Movement. So how did that work? How did she engage the communities? How did she come to this point where we have now planted over 47 million trees? Well, it was really through a process of dialogue and a process of listening. Just as the first step she'd taken with the women was to sit down and listen to them. That's what we do in our community empowerment education seminars. It's really sitting down and saying, okay, so what are the issues you're facing? And I actually think it's a therapeutic process that it's not called that, just as we don't call our work spiritual. But it's a therapeutic process where you actually sit down and say, and it's quite profound. I think for us in a Western society, we don't understand how dislocated rural people can be from that opportunity to really talk about their issues. But it's really this process of understanding what the issues are, why have people come to this place, and then talking about, so here we are in this place. What can we do about this? What can we do? And I think it's very similar to the transition town movement, where people come together and they talk about their problems. They form a community collective, and through that energy together, you share your issues, you feel less disempowered, and you find ways to act. So a very similar process, the movement of the Green Belt Movement. And at a certain point through this process of speaking up and taking action, people started to speak up and take action about a lot of other things, like land grabbing, like the lack of democratic process. And in 2002, there were the first democratic elections in Kenya for 24 years. So there'd been a dictator, Daniel Arap Moi, who really had an iron grip on the society and was taking land and giving it away. As you've seen throughout the centuries in different cultures, land is seen as something that you give as an elite gift when you come into power. We still see it. And what happened was that the Green Belt Movement started raising their voices about these land grabbings. And there were historical fights that happened across Kenya, really with these rural women protesting against this dictator. And at a certain point, they came into a park in the middle of Nairobi, and they camped out, and they started getting beaten up by the police, and they ended up taking shelter in a church. And they ended up living in that church for 14 months while they were refusing to go home until their sons, who were political prisoners, were released. And so these are the ways that Wangari worked with the rural women of Kenya, worked with the people of Kenya to bring about democratic change. And so it was for that in 2004 she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the first environmentalist to have the Nobel Peace Prize. And it's really about this link between peace and democratic process and the environment. So I think she was an incredibly inspirational person to work for. Very charismatic and driven. And as I said earlier, she carried on working like that right up to the end. She died of cancer in September last year, quite suddenly, even though we knew she was sick, but she was one of those people that just kept going till the very end. And so now we sit with her legacy, and we're looking at what do we do next. And part of what we do next is that we share the story of her life, which I'm doing with you tonight. And we have a campaign, which is called the Hummingbird Campaign. Because of how Wangari worked and because of how she inspired people, she had a special story that she used to tell about the hummingbird, where the hummingbird sees a terrible forest fire. It's a massive fire in the forest. And all the other animals are standing by, doing nothing. The elephants and the lion and all these, animals with much more capacity. And a little tiny hummingbird is going back and forth and taking a little tiny bead of water and putting it on the forest fire and going back. And picking up another little tiny bead and going back and forth, while all of these other huge animals are standing by and saying, oh, what's that hummingbird doing? Honestly, what does it think it's doing? It's so little, it's so pointless. And I think as women, we often feel that way. We feel like our voices aren't perhaps as valued. Perhaps we don't feel that we should speak out, that we should let someone else who has more command of the stage to speak out. And anyway, so the little hummingbird went back and forth and back and forth. And eventually it stopped and said, well, I'm doing the best I can. And that's what Wangari's message was to us all. It's not the big things, it's the little things that you do that make a difference.
The beauty with people who engage in permaculture principles is that they are inherently unreasonable people. And we need unreasonable people in the world, because unreasonable people stand up and say, this is no good. I refuse to accept the norm. And I'm going to take the steps to change it in my own life. Even if it is about starting from the very basis of life itself, which is of course growing things, growing life, growing food to nourish and sustain us.
So I've devoted well over 20 years of my life to permaculture, and I thought, well, some of you will know exactly what it is, but some of you may think, well, what's this funny word? So it is really a thinking tool for designing low carbon, highly productive gardens, communities, lifestyles, even publishing companies. And it has this profound understanding of the inherent principles in nature. That there are principles, as we see in something like biomimicry, that we can actually learn through observation, through opening our awareness on an intellectual level, but actually on a more meta level beyond that. And what I do for a living, I am actually a gardener, but I found myself becoming a publisher. And I started life publishing books, and then this permaculture magazine turned up and put my life in a completely different spin. So our mission is to publish information in any format that helps empower people, that helps people connect with themselves, connect with their community, and connect with Mother Earth. And we are about publishing. We have a reader here tonight who said, I needed to read something happy, because conventional media only tells you what is broken, what is fragmented. There's so much of it. There's this constant disempowerment message coming out. This is broken, we don't know how to fix it. Within this paradigm, this doesn't work anymore. But actually there is an entire world out there that can be fixed, that can be regenerated, that our whole lifestyle, our hearts can be regenerated, and there are people out there who are great burning lights of inspiration. And so this is the design. Now I could do you a whole Schumacher's College Green Entrepreneur session, and I'm not going to, so we're going to move on. But I wanted you to have a picture that, yeah, I've designed my garden with permaculture principles, but I've also designed an entire commercial business with one, and a social enterprise. So we're going to move on. So what do? We're about transformation, and I have a passionate thing about media, because here we are in the West, we are overwhelmed by information. And we have to learn to become very discriminating about the messages that we entertain and listen to. The true purpose of media, like art, is to communicate new ideas that deepen our understanding of humanity and ultimately our capacity to live a more creative and in a more gentle way on this planet. We are here to learn how to make peace with our fellow human beings and to nurture and steward the earth and all of her wonderful species. And if I had to sum up my job, that is my mission statement. We produced this with the former editor of The Ecologist who said, I love what you do, it's so positive, I want to come and help you. So he helped us set up this website. And already Polly said it is true actually. I know because I'm a Google Analytics nerd. It is over a million hits now, and that's only in its second year. So we've got 7 billion people on the planet, and it's only a million, so it's not good enough. More. Okay. We've set up an educational project, and it's not just formal education. We like to ideally capture people and immerse them in this beautiful world. It's in the middle of the South Downs National Park, and it has the most beautiful habitats within it. Yes, please. And so what do? Well, we've got lots of, as you would hope, we generate our own electricity. We make people poo into compost loos on the campsite, which challenges them sometimes because we're terribly scatophobic as in the West. We renovate buildings to a high standard that used to be naval accommodation. We build roundwood timber frame buildings, which we publish about, built by Ben Law and his apprentices and craftsmen and volunteers. We make our own biomass. We manage our habitat so that we have some extraordinary chalk downland habitat, which I am passionate about. We bring in kids who are excluded from school so that they don't get shoved in a sin bin and kind of locked in. We bring them out, we teach them how to make fire with flint and steel, and we teach them how to woodland management, and they respond and flower, and they do loads of bushcraft and knife stuff, all the stuff they're not allowed to do at school that they're not allowed to go to anymore because they're called the naughty boys, but actually there's naughty girls too. And we get people building with local materials. We're very passionate about not shipping in. You know, we talk about food miles. Well, we're into building miles at the Sustainability Centre. And just within 9 months of taking a dark, old, gloomy conifer plantation that was deer and squirrel damaged, had a few standard beech in it that were knackered, and clearing it, we've had 3-foot-long grass snake, yummy, a green sandpiper, and a purple emperor. And that was the sighting within the first 3 months. Now, to an ecologist, that's deeply exciting. It's deeply exciting stuff. And the willow just went from little whips in year 1 to woof. So, invite. We also bury people. We have a toddler group, and then we have the grave. So we really are cradle to the grave community. And people live on site. And this woodland burial, we don't take ashes, we don't take laminated coffins, we don't receive embalmed bodies, we take it au naturel. I could tell you a story about that, but I might leave it for after Polly. But what does it do? It offers an incredible opportunity for community creativity at a time of deep poignancy. If I had to say, what do I want to say tonight? What is my message to you? The earth regenerates. The earth has the most extraordinary power of regeneration, and all we have to do is to just help it happen. You know, do not measure by human action the power of planet Earth. And what I would say to you is that if you can attune to your connection with this beautiful planet Earth if you can go deep into your heart, you will feel and experience this enormous and extraordinary expansion of your awareness.
It's about leadership. It's about leadership within each and every single one of us. It's about each and every single one of us taking responsibility for our decisions, for our actions, for what we decide to do within our lives and what we want to get out of our lives and how we go about that. But also about understanding that there's something far greater at play. It's not just about what's in it for me. In fact, it's not that at all. It's about parking that thought way over there and saying, well, how can I contribute to the greater good, for the greater good of all beings? Not just for other human beings, but all beings. Because of course there are so many other entities at play here. You look at any patch of the planet, it's not just people that live there, of course. And that's been very much a big driver in my engagement in earth rights and the law of ecocide, is that expansion of the cycle of concern. Not just human to human engagement, but humans to all beings. And how we put in place a law that really creates a system of trusteeship and stewardship that puts people and planet first, and that we're looking to future generations. What is it that we actually need and want to do here and now that will ensure that those that come up behind us benefit even more than we are today? So it's the complete antithesis, complete reverse to what we are doing at the moment, which is we take without thought for the future, and we certainly don't think about giving back in as we go. Now, part of that problem has been law, because it is the law to put profit first. It is the number one legal duty for directors and CEOs to maximise their profits for their shareholders. Now, that was a law that originated 200 years ago. In fact, it originated here in Britain. It was a very colonial way of thinking. And it spread right across the world. And that often happens. The law starts somewhere and then another country adopts it and so on and so forth. But what it's left us with is a system that doesn't really look to our legacy, our futures, our children's futures. And ultimately we've ended up with law that's no longer fit for purpose. So the law does need to change. But the law also needs to change with a different form of thinking. Because of course that law was put in place when it was just purely about the supremacy of humanity, in particular man at that time as it was seen, driving business and industry forward in a way that didn't think of anything else. Now we know better. That's the beauty of it. We know better. We can see the consequences and we understand that. So really, in a way, law is just playing catch up. And the beauty of it is so many more people get this now. I don't think this is a niche argument that I'm putting forward here that only speaks to very few people. In fact, all over the world, everywhere I'm going, people are understanding this, in whatever level of engagement it is. Because ultimately, a law of ecocide is really a wisdom. And people are engaging on this wisdom of understanding that we need a law, an international law that puts people and planet first. Actually, as a woman, I have a great advantage. It's easier for me to stand up and speak up about this. As a woman, to talk about this in the context of feelings and emotions, especially when I step in to speak to business, and especially when I'm speaking to extractive business, which doesn't really normally speak that language. Somehow I can get away with that because I'm a woman, but I'm also speaking a very practical language because I'm talking about international law. So what I'm trying to do is I'm really trying to bring heart and head together at the same time. But also what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to reach out to not just other women but men in this world, and to give men permission to speak out from a position of ultimately love for the earth. Because this is really about the sacredness of life itself.
Hi everybody, greetings from Nairobi. sorry I cannot be there with you today as we discuss ecocide. I have to tell you I'm excited about this concept because in so many ways Professor Mathai reminded us every day that if we destroy our environment, in many ways we're destroying ourselves. So I just love the way we weave these two words together, ecocide, and just dramatize the reality of what it means to us. At the Greenbelt Movement, we've understood that so well. All our work really, every day, is focused on how we can improve our immediate environment because we know in its survival depends our own, and that is really the message of the Greenbelt Movement. For Wangari Maathai, all her life she spent trying to make sure that people understand the linkage between a healthy environment and healthy people, a healthy environment and our own survival, and healthy environment, the survival of the species. And so I just want to thank you all so much for this opportunity to be able to share some thoughts amongst yourselves and discuss the possibility of eradicating ecocide. Really, if we don't eradicate ecocide, even in this day of climate change, what alternative do we have? What alternatives do we have for future generations? To really look ourselves and ourselves in the mirror and say that this is the damage we're leaving for future generations. So I honestly wish to say I wish you all a wonderful seminar, a wonderful time and a wonderful event as you discuss this issue. It's a serious issue and it's a timely issue because climate change is upon us. I tell you, in Nairobi, in this rainy season, we saw rains that we've never seen before. We saw floods and effects of climate change that we have not experienced before. This is real, this is reality. And we saw in many ways ecocide. We've seen the damage of the environment and also the loss of lives and the loss of property. It has been extremely devastating. And so for us it's a reality, and I just thank you that you put this in the forefront. I wish you all the best as you eradicate ecocide. Thank you very much, Francesca, for representing the Greenbelt Movement at this event, and we look forward to hearing how else we can engage and work more with you. Thank you.
So this is a message from Ella Gandhi, the granddaughter of Gandhi, sent just literally yesterday to our team, and it's a message to the Ecocide Campaign Group. Humankind's entry into the 21st century has been a shocking reminder of the risks to both the future of the earth as well as to the existence of life. Many religious leaders warned of impending disasters at the close of the 20th century, but the warnings were disregarded, and disaster after disaster resulting in death and destruction have become a regular feature of this century. Clearly, much of the causative factors are attributed to the behaviour of humankind. Women and children have become the victims of these disasters, both natural disasters as well as wars and violence. Gandhi once said that to realise the dream of liberation, he needs the support and commitment of women. Women's voices are powerful. Women speak from the heart, and in today's society, that is most essential. We see daily policies, laws, and their implementation carried out with a cold, steely, authoritarian action for compliance. The humane spirit is absent, and that can only be invoked if we bring to the table the humane spirit of a mother. Today, however, the mothers are crying out for protection of the earth so that future generations can live in peace and comfort. Imagine a life without food as we destroy the fertility of the earth through so many acts, such as unharnessed mining activities, uncontrolled development that destroys the earth, use of chemicals, landfill sites that are filled with plastic and other substances that cannot replenish the fertility of the earth. As we destroy the quality of the water through pouring into our rivers and into our waterbeds chemicals and other substances which pollute the water, imagine a life without clean air as we emit carbon beyond its 350 limit. We as mothers are not only concerned about what we have today and how much more we can have tomorrow, but about what our children and our children's grandchildren and great-grandchildren will have and the quality of their lives. It is in this spirit that we call on people not to destroy the earth, and for those in power to exercise their authority, both to create awareness about the need to conserve and care for the earth, and to take adequate steps to stop those who disregard these warnings and continue on the path of ecological destruction by making such destruction a crime. And it's signed by Ella Gandhi, and she says that she believes that a law of ecocide will change all of this. So we are very grateful to have her support for this, because this is an idea of its time, and it clearly is. It's keeping me very busy for a start. It's keeping my team very busy. But it's about envisioning the new world. It's about a world that actually we saw Maddie talking about. It's about that becoming the norm instead of the exception. And by creating an international law of ecocide, that's precisely what we do. We put people and planet first. And when we do that, then actually something truly wonderful flourishes. And actually, that's when we put Earth at the core of all of our business. So thank you very much.